今日走ってみるかね。
お願いします。
Edward was getting old. His bearings were worn, and he clanked as he puffed along. He was taking empty cattle trucks to a market town. The sun shone, birds sang. But Edward was heading for trouble. Come on, he puffed. Oh, 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 screamed the trucks. Edward puffed and clanked. The trucks rattled and screamed. Some cows were grazing nearby. They were not used to trains. The noise and smoke disturbed them. As Edward clanked by, they broke through the fence and ran across the line. A coupling was broken. Edward felt a jerk but didn't take much notice. He was used to trucks. Bother those trucks, he thought. Why can't they come quietly? He was at the next station before either he or his driver realized what had happened. Cows to break his train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. Toby was cross. Stop! I've got Thomas's passengers, wailed Bertie, roaring up to the gates. It was no other Thomas's fireman not coming to work today. Why did I promise to help the passengers catch the train? Hey, I see him, cheered Bertie as he go it. Bertie skidded into the yard. Wait, cried Bertie. He was just in time. Hill is too steep. This hill is too steep, grumbled the coaches as Edward snorted in front. They reached the top at last and ran smoothly into the station. Peep, peep, whistled Edward. Get in quickly, please. 3 cheers for Bertie, called the passengers. Bert, Edward called to Thomas. What? Already? Thomas was only teasing. Broken up? What a shame. Broken up? What a shame. I must help Trevor, I must. He thought of all his friends who liked engines, but strangely none of them would have room for a traction engine at home. It's a shame, he hissed. Then, there, on the platform, was the very person. His home is in the vicarage orchard, and he sees Edward every day. The station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross. The fireman was ready when Edward arrived. We'll catch him, puffed Edward. James, we're coming, called Edward. Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last he caught up with James. Steady, Edward, called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. And James's fireman scrambled across and took control. So the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward. I am sorry, whispered James. Thank you for saving me. You were splendid, Edward. That's all right, replied Edward. The engines arrived at the station side by side. The fat controller was waiting. The traction engine enjoyed living in the vicarage orchard. Edward came to see him every day, but sometimes Trevor didn't have enough work to do. At last the inspector arrived. Thomas felt very miserable.
Why don't you help me with these cars? Felt happier with Edward and set to work at once. The cars were silly, heavy, and noisy. The two engines had to work hard, pushing and pulling all afternoon. At last, they reached the top of the hill.
Just then, Edward bustled up. Bill and Ben, why are you playing?
But their track and bridges are not so strong as those on the main line. Sir Topham Hatt does not allow the heavier main line engines like Gordon to run on them. But one day, the way Gordon was talking, you would have thought Sir Topham Hatt had given this order for quite another reason. So now he set off first. But the signalman at the junction wasn't told about the change. By mistake, he sent Edward along the main line. Gordon was sent along the branch and arrived cold and
To take them to meet Bill and Ben. He found it hard to start the heavy train. Did you see him straining? Asked Henry. Positively painful, remarked James. Just pathetic. Edward's better than any of you. I've done it, we're off! I've done it, we're off! Said Edward as he finally puffed out of the station. Bill and Ben were delighted to see the visitors. They loved being photographed. Later, they took the party to the China Clay Works in a brake van. On the way, the weather changed. Wind and rain buffeted Edward. His sanding gear failed, and his fireman rode in front, dropping sand on the rails by hand. Suddenly, Edward's wheels slipped fiercely. With a shrieking crack, something pulled his hardest. But his wheels kept slipping and he could not start the heavy train. Come on, he puffed and moved cautiously forward. The first coach moving helped to start the second, and the second helped the third. I've done it, puffed Edward. Steady, boy, warned his driver. Well done, boy. You've got them, And he listened happily to Edward's steady beat as he forged slowly but surely ahead. At last, battered, weary, but unbeaten, Edward steamed in. Henry was waiting for the visitors with the special train. Peep, peep, peep! The fat control